Hey everybody, my name is James and I am a Renaissance guy, and that means that I like to do a lot of different things. And today, I want to tell you about this deck that's behind me that I built about 2 years ago. The reason why I want to tell you about it is because I think it is a relatively unique design and was a little bit complicated to think about and to build because it involves a stairway up to a deck, about a flight of stairs, on a hill, and kind of a complicated layout because of where I was going to put it. The reason why I built it was because the concrete steps that were on the house when I bought the house had cracked and settled and were a little bit unsafe. As well as next to the concrete steps, I wasn't able to get any grass to grow there, and the kind of temporary patio made of paving stones was settling really badly, and it wasn't a very useful space either for growing grass or for using as a patio. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull out these concrete steps and I'm going to replace this paving stone area with an actual deck and tie it all together. And so that's why I did this. So today what I want to do is first I want to give you a little bit of a tour of the deck just to kind of show you how it's laid out, just to get a sense of what it's like. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I built it. This is not going to be a true how-to video because unfortunately I didn't take any video of the process of building it, though I do have several pictures of the process that I will share as I talk about kind of the step-by-step process that I used when I was putting it together. If there's anything you want to know more about that I don't cover in this video, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to reply with whatever information I can provide. So let's get started with a little tour. So starting here from my driveway, we're right here in front of my garage, my driveway that leads up to the house. And so you can see next to the steps leading up, I've got some garden boxes that I use for flowers and herbs right around the edge. It's a slightly different color than the rest of the deck because it's a more recent addition, and I was letting the pressure-treated wood age before staining it. So the boxes are not yet stained while the rest of the deck is. And then if we come over here, we've got the steps up to the deck, which are extra wide. It's 5 feet 4 inches wide here to make plenty of room for people to come up and come down at the same time. I've got kids, and there's neighborhood kids who are often playing in our yard, and there's a lot of traffic on these, and so I wanted to make them nice and wide. And you can see we've got several steps here up to a landing, followed by a bigger landing. Next to it, a larger garden box that has some stones going out to the front yard. And then it turns to another small flight of steps, and these steps run all the way around the deck to the other side. And so we come up to the main level of the deck here, which is kind of our sitting area. And then that goes up to the small porch on the house to our front door. And that's mostly it. One other thing that I'll point out, over here on the far corner, is that I added a little door right there so that I could access under it if ever I needed to make any repairs or if any animals were getting under there and I needed to deal with that. But also that's a great space for storing my extension ladder. And so if we come over here and go around a tree, here's how this looks from the front yard of the house, looking down to the driveway. And one thing that I'll say as well is that there are no railings around the edge of this deck, and that's because the height of it did not require them. I can't remember the exact height that there is, but I looked up the requirements, the code, and the highest point off of the ground is technically right here. Even though you've got so many steps going up it, the level that you're standing on is always very close to ground level. And so this being the highest point, it wasn't so high that I needed to add a railing, and so I kept it a very open concept deck. And that's the benefit of keeping it close to the ground. So now let's go back to the driveway, and I'll talk about my process of building this, kind of a step-by-step because I built it in sections. And again, if there's anything that I don't end up talking about here that you are interested in hearing more about, let me know in the comments and I will be happy to reply. So the very first thing I did after paying somebody to rip out the concrete steps that were here and remove the bushes that were next to them is level the ground a little bit so that I could put these steps and these different landings where I wanted them to be without setting them in the dirt. I made an effort to have as little wood as possible touching the actual ground rather than setting them in the soil. And so I had to do a little bit of leveling of the area and some shoveling and moving of soil, and my kids helped me with that quite a bit. And then after I did that, any area of the hill that was very steep hill, like right here, as well as up there, going up to that main level, and then there behind those steps, is I actually covered the hill with burlap and then put a lot of paving stones and gravel on top of that. And the purpose was I did not want a heavy rain to wash a whole bunch of mud down to here and end up covering underneath here with wet soil and rotting out the wood. And so underneath here, it's actually covered in burlap and a lot of gravel and stuff just for drainage purposes and to keep the soil where it is. But the first thing I did as far as construction was to frame out this first level of steps. I started from the ground and worked my way up because I didn't want to find myself starting up top and having mismeasured and my steps are kind of a weird distance. So I went from the bottom up and just used pre-made stringers for everywhere that you see steps. And here at the bottom, I decided to pour a small concrete pad for this bottom step to sit on. So it's sitting on even ground. And I ended up having to trim the bottom step of that stringer a little bit short so that this side is actually, as you can see, shorter than this side over here. And so I put those steps in first, and then this landing and this landing. And all of the decking here, the main deck, is all 2x6s for the structure, and then deck boards, which are 5/4 by 6 on the top. And the legs, I'm sure there's a different word for it other than legs, but I'm a theater guy and we say legs. The legs that are supporting it are 4x4s. And everything is pressure treated, which means that I needed to let it dry out for about a year before I stained it. Otherwise, the stain would not have stuck to the wood. And so it went unstained for about a year. But I built these two landings, and this landing is covered with deck boards all the way back to this back here. I've got this notch here, and I didn't say this in the tour, but this notch has proven to be a nice spot to store scooters for my kids or a small broom. It just ended up being a nice little spot to put things there. But this decking is covering all the way back to that wall right there because these steps are sitting on top of it. And so I framed this out, put the deck boards on top of this before I even thought about adding steps. And so built these two things, and you can see photos of how those look. And then I built a frame for this upper level that actually stopped right here. So you can see this seam, and you can see based on the screw pattern that I've got legs under either side of that. But this whole upper deck splits right there, so that this side over here is just one big 12-foot by 12-foot. This side over here is one big 12-foot by 12-foot square connected to a big L-shaped deck right there. And everything is very sufficiently legged up. I've got a lot of 4x4s underneath holding this thing up. And so after I built that frame and had that lower level nicely decked out, then I added stringers along here to have steps to this corner. So from here over, and I went ahead and added those steps, and then was able to put in the frame for this 12 by 12, this 12 foot by 12 foot section, and then cover all of that up. The next step then was both putting these railings up, which these railings are 4x4s here and at the top that I cut at an angle, and then that I cut at a notch there and an angle down here with lag screws holding it into place. This up here is just a deck board that has been cut and sanded and rounded. This guy down here, this guy up here are 2x4s. And then these guys are just 2x4s that I ripped down to become 2x2s that I cut at 45-degree angle top and bottom. And that's how that is all put together. And that top one up there is also just another deck board that's been rounded off. And that's the same way that these are built as well. 4x4s there, there, and down there at the bottom. Deck board railing at the top that's just been cut, angled, rounded, etc. with lag screws screwing it into place. It's really solid, does not move very much, feels very, very stable. Then, kind of the second to last thing I did was put those steps on the outside there, and built a garden box here and there. And this was just open space part of the yard, and those garden boxes didn't yet exist. It was not until about a year later that I decided to turn this area into a garden box and add those garden boxes down there. And those are just built of 2x6s and 2x10s, I believe, that are screwed into place. And I used 2x2, and I just kind of spiked them down into the ground and screwed them into the sides, and that's how those are held in place. And all around the edge, and I think this is very important, all around the edge of the deck, where the edge of it touches the ground, like in here, it does touch the ground under here, and right under here, and you can even kind of see it under here. I added a lot of gravel, a lot of very fine gravel around the edges where it's touching the soil. And that was, again, to increase the ability of water to drain out and to prevent the wood from rotting as quickly as it otherwise would. But there is that. And I guess one other thing that I will say, I'll probably say a couple of other things, is that all of the legs are anchored into the ground with concrete. So dug some holes, put the legs down in there, put concrete around them. And the way that this door is built is it's just hinged at the top and it's just laying there closed by gravity. And I've got, blocks in front of it to prevent critters from going under and lifting it up. And also because there's a little bit of a gap underneath that those blocks are covering. And I guess I'll say this as well. One issue that I encountered was how to deal with the hose. The spigot is right here. And I thought, well, I could just run a hose across the deck, but then I realized that that would be a tripping hazard, and I just didn't want to deal with that. So I decided to go ahead and run the hose under the deck. And so I drilled a hole for the hose to go down into, and then it comes over here, and it just comes out right under here. I don't know if you can see it with the shadow, but there's a little bit of space between this siding and the ground that the hose can come out from. And that all has worked so far. So if you have any questions about how I did any of this, I would be happy to answer them in the comments. So thanks for watching. If you enjoy this sort of thing, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, give the video a like if you think other people should see it, and have a great day.